to find their place in the world. But if you look to the past, it'll tell you where you need to go. Famed psychologist and author of We Who Wrestle with God, Dr. Jordan Peterson joins me now. Dr. Peterson, we love this book. We love all of your books. This one a little meatier than some of the ones I've been reading recently, but you've observed this cultural shift in this country throughout the world. People are struggling to find out, is it their identity, their mission, their meaning in life? What are you observing right now?
Well, I think you can attribute the fact of the culture war that's occurring everywhere in the West, very intensely in the United States, but also throughout Europe, Australia, New Zealand, Canada, to a confusion about the nature of the story that should orient us in the world. And the academics, the postmodern types, have put forward really the notion that life is about hedonistic pleasure or about power. And the problem with that is that both those stories are self-defeating. You don't want to be around anybody who's primarily motivated by power. And you don't want to be around anyone who's primarily motivated by their own pleasure-seeking self-interest. You need a different pattern of orientation in the world to make you desirable, to make you able to have functional relationships and in order to stabilize the future and to give your life meaning. And for better or worse, the story that the free countries of the world are founded on are the stories of the biblical library. And so we now know enough, I think, about human psychology to make a case for the validity of those stories in a manner that's compelling and also scientifically credible. And I've tried to do that in this book.
There's a lot of people out there not very attached to the Bible or to the Christian faith. Why is it so important to go back all of these years and listen to these stories? Why is it important for people to do that now, especially?
Well, it does appear to be the case that we see the world through a story. I would say that there's converging evidence from multiple lines of scientific inquiry that that's the case. In fact, a description of the structure through which we see the world is a story. The next question then is, in the face of widespread confusion about identity, that's what identity politics is, it's confusion about the story that orients us in the world. We have to look somewhere to ground ourselves, and the age-old historical traditions of mankind are the orientation poles that have guided us forever, and there's no reason to assume that we've superseded that any more than we've actually superseded the necessity for stories. Everyone wants a great movie, a great novel. They want to be able to tell a great story about their own life. Like, the story is integral to being human, and there's a pattern of story that we need to know, and those patterns are encapsulated in our traditions. There's no getting away from that and still being human. We can deviate from it and degenerate into pathology and meaninglessness, but there's no getting away from the story. The question is, what's the right story? What's the correct story?
And you talk about Cain and Abel, you talk about Adam and Eve in here. What locks people into meaning? Many people in America right now, their life has no meaning. It's just pleasure, watching TV, eating. Why is the desire for meaning so important, and how do you arrive there?
Well, there's two ways of thinking about that. We're arranged biologically and spiritually so that we find the deepest meaning in acting out the patterns that are most productive psychologically, socially, and in the long run. That's different than happiness. That's more akin to the sense of purpose and accomplishment that might flood over you, let's say, if you accomplish something difficult and worthwhile. That's a marker from the deepest recesses of your soul that you're on a path that's going to unite you with other people. It's going to stabilize you psychologically. It's going to make you a blessing to yourself. That's the terminology from the story of Abraham. It'll help you establish something of long-term permanent significance. It'll make you a good father. It'll make you a good mother, a good husband, a good citizen, the sort of person that people want to be around voluntarily. All of that, that's associated with meaning, and that's associated in turn with, well, you might say voluntary responsible conduct. It's something like that. And that's the right basis for psychological stability and for community. It's not arbitrary. There's a pattern to it.
And you need to have personal responsibility, personal accountability, and a little sacrifice. That's been missing in a lot of places these days.
Well, we haven't told a story of responsibility, really, especially to young people, not effectively for about 4 generations. And the consequence of that is a crisis of meaning. And it's so strange that the antidote to meaning of a crisis of meaning is, in fact, voluntary responsibility. And people know this because, one of the things that, what would you say, is of great benefit to everyone is to understand that your efforts have been well received by the people that you're serving. That's something that you can comfort yourself on many a long and dark night, that you've actually been of some genuine utility to other people you love, maybe even people that are your enemies, if you were able to conduct yourself at the highest possible level of virtue. And there's a very tight relationship between the voluntary acceptance of high levels of responsibility and the meaning that sustains you even when you're suffering. That's a wonderful thing to know. Why work hard? Why be of service to other people? Because it imbues your life with the significance that enables you to tolerate the difficulties of your existence and without bitterness and with hope. That's all associated with meaning. The stories of the Bible, they're about you, whether you know it or not. Obviously, who else would they be about?
Life is a story, and we're going to get back to those stories. We who wrestle with God, Dr. Jordan Peterson, thank you so much for joining Jesse Waters Primetime, one of the best dressed guests as well that we've ever had on set. Thank you so much.
You bet. Thanks very much.
Fox